The sound of my grandson's desperate knocking echoed through the frozen air as I approached the house on Christmas Eve, his small frame trembling against the locked door in nothing but pajamas. Through the frosted window, I could see the entire family gathered around the glowing fireplace, unwrapping gifts and sharing warm laughter. My blood boiled as I realized the unthinkable betrayal happening right before my eyes. The 7 words I shouted as I broke through that door would shatter their perfect holiday forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The bitter December wind cut through my wool coat as I walked up the familiar driveway, my breath forming white clouds in the 30-degree air. In my gloved hands, I carried the carefully wrapped present I'd spent 3 weeks choosing for Tommy, a deluxe model airplane kit of a World War II Mustang, the same plane his great-grandfather had flown. 8 years old, and this would be his first Christmas without his mother, Lisa. I'd driven 45 minutes through increasingly heavy snow to be here on time. Sarah had called 3 days ago, her voice unusually sweet over the phone. "William, make sure you're here by 7 sharp on Christmas Eve. We're doing gifts early this year, a new tradition." My hands fumbled in the cold as I reached for the spare key under the ceramic flower pot. The key Lisa had given me when Tommy was born. The pot was there, but when I lifted it, my fingers found only frozen dirt. The key was gone. I knocked on the heavy oak door with my knuckles, the sound echoing in the crisp night air. Waited 30 seconds, counting each one. Then knocked again, harder this time. The Christmas music inside was loud enough, Bing Crosby crooning about white Christmases, that maybe they couldn't hear me over the celebration. That's when I heard it, a different sound that made my blood freeze in my veins. Small fists pounding against the door from outside, desperate and rhythmic, like a trapped bird beating against glass. There was Tommy, standing right there on the front porch beside me, his small body shivering uncontrollably in nothing but thin cotton pajamas decorated with little airplanes. His feet were bare against the frozen wooden boards, his lips blue with cold, his whole frame trembling so violently I could hear his teeth chattering. "Please let me in." "I'm so cold. Please, my hands hurt. Daddy, please. I promise I'll be quiet. I promise I'll be good." I dropped Tommy's gift and knelt down beside him on the icy porch, pulling him into my arms. His small body was like ice against mine, shaking so hard I thought he might break apart. "Tommy, it's Grandpa William. I'm here now, buddy." "Grandpa William?" His voice was so small, so broken, his whole body shaking against mine. "Is it really you?" "Yes, buddy, it's me." "What happened? Why are you out here?" "They locked me out, Grandpa. I was just getting my special Christmas pajamas from the dryer in the basement, the ones with the airplanes that Mom bought me last year. When I came back up to the kitchen door, Sarah had locked it. All the doors. She said I was being too loud during their party. She said maybe if I spent some time thinking about my behavior in the cold, I'd learn to be more respectful." "How long have you been out here, Tommy?" "I don't know, Grandpa." "Forever and ever." My fingers stopped hurting because I can't feel them anymore. And my toes feel like ice cubes. I tried calling for Daddy through the window, but he can't hear me over the music. I looked down at this precious child shivering in my arms. His lips were blue, his small hands like ice when I touched them. This wasn't just neglect or poor judgment. This was calculated cruelty designed to break a child's spirit. I pressed my face to the frosted window, my breath fogging the glass. The living room was a Christmas wonderland. The 12-foot tree dominated the corner, perfectly decorated with matching silver and gold ornaments. Presents were stacked high around the base, creating a mountain of expensive wrapping paper and elaborate bows. Michael sat cross-legged by the tree, carefully unwrapping an expensive Swiss watch from a velvet-lined box. His face glowed with genuine pleasure as he held it up to catch the firelight. Sarah stood behind him, wearing a new red cashmere sweater, clapping her hands in delight as she watched him discover her gift. Even the Johnsons from next door were there with their 8-year-old daughter Emma, sitting comfortably on the leather sofa with crystal wine glasses, laughing at something Michael had said. Little Emma sat on the Persian rug playing with an expensive Victorian dollhouse. The whole scene looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, warm, loving, perfect. Perfect except for one devastating thing. Tommy wasn't in it. The child whose laughter should have been the soundtrack to this celebration was locked outside like an unwanted animal, freezing to death while they celebrated without him. The spot where Tommy usually sat during family gatherings, right by the tree, close enough to touch the presents, was conspicuously empty. His favorite chair had been turned to face away from the family circle, as if deliberately excluding him. I looked back through the window again, fury building in my chest like a forest fire. Sarah caught my eye through the glass. She saw me standing there in the snow with Tommy in my arms. She saw her stepson shivering against me, blue-lipped and hypothermic. She saw the absolute fury written across my face, and she smiled, not an embarrassed smile of someone caught in a mistake. This was something else entirely, a cold, satisfied expression. A smile that said she was pleased with what she'd accomplished, that this was exactly the outcome she'd planned for. Then she turned back to her wine glass and laughed at something one of the Johnsons had said, as if locking a child outside in potentially lethal weather was perfectly normal behavior. That smile told me everything I needed to know about who Sarah really was beneath her carefully constructed mask. This wasn't an accident or a moment of poor judgment. This was calculated. This was cruel. This was exactly what she'd planned when she'd called me 3 days ago about being here by 7 sharp. She'd wanted me to find Tommy like this. She'd wanted me to see him suffering while they celebrated inside. She'd wanted to demonstrate her power, to show me exactly what she was capable of when crossed. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers while holding Tommy close to share my body heat. 911, what's your emergency? There's a child suffering from hypothermia at 1524 Maple Street. He's 8 years old and has been locked outside in freezing weather for over an hour wearing only pajamas. As I waited for help to arrive, I tried the front door, the back door, every window I could reach. Everything was locked tight from the inside. They had deliberately trapped him outside and were letting him freeze rather than interrupt their perfect Christmas party. The 7 words were already burning in my throat, words that would end this nightmare forever. But first, I had to save my grandson. Officer Martinez arrived with his partner, Officer Rodriguez, their flashlights cutting through the falling snow. Rodriguez immediately took charge of Tommy, wrapping him in emergency blankets and carrying him to the heated patrol car while Martinez took my statement. Through the car window, I watched the paramedics check my grandson's vital signs, his blue lips slowly returning to pink. Sir, based on the child's condition, he was outside approximately 90 minutes, Martinez said, his breath steaming. His core temperature was dangerously low when we arrived. This is serious child endangerment. The front door opened with theatrical timing. Sarah appeared, perfectly composed in a fresh cream sweater, her lipstick reapplied, hair styled like she was posing for a magazine. Behind her, Christmas music played softly, and I could smell cinnamon and wine, the sense of celebration while a child nearly died of exposure. "Officers, I'm so sorry for this confusion," she said, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. "William tends to exaggerate situations." "Ma'am, we have a child with near hypothermia," Martinez replied firmly. "That's not an exaggeration. Tommy was having one of his episodes. Screaming, throwing Christmas decorations, completely disrupting our guests. His therapist specifically recommended timeouts for overstimulation." "What therapist?" I demanded. For a split second, uncertainty flickered across her features. "Dr. Rebecca Stevens. She's been working with Tommy since his behavioral issues started." "Tommy doesn't have a therapist. He's never needed one." Michael appeared behind her, still clutching that expensive Swiss watch. My son, who used to read Tommy bedtime stories in funny voices, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, maybe you should go home. We can discuss this when everyone's calmer." Discuss what, Michael? How did you watch your wife lock your son outside in 30-degree weather? How did you sit inside opening expensive gifts while your child begged to be let in? I didn't know she had locked him out, he said, but his voice carried no conviction. For 90 minutes? You didn't wonder where he was? Officer Rodriguez approached from the patrol car. Ma'am, the child shows clear signs of mild hypothermia. His core temperature was 92 degrees when we arrived. At that level, we're talking about potential organ damage if exposure had continued. I watched Sarah's face carefully. For someone supposedly trained as a registered nurse, she showed no concern about Tommy's medical condition. No maternal worry, no relief that he was safe, just a cold calculation about how this might affect her carefully constructed image. Officer, Tommy has severe behavioral issues, Sarah continued in her professional nurse voice. He was sent outside for a brief time out after destroying Christmas decorations, maybe 15 minutes at most. Ma'am, the child's physical condition indicates much longer exposure. Children often exaggerate when they're upset, especially children dealing with unresolved grief. Martinez finished his report. I'm filing a comprehensive report with Child Protective Services. They'll be conducting a follow-up investigation within 48 hours. I'm going with Tommy to the hospital, I announced, but Martinez shook his head. Sir, you'll need to follow separately. Department policy. After the patrol car left with Tommy, and I'd given Martinez all my contact information, I found myself facing Michael and Sarah alone. The Christmas music still played softly. Now it was Silent Night, which felt like cruel mockery. Something poisonous had infected the air around us. Through the front window, I could see the Johnsons' car pulling away. Emma's confused face pressed against the back window. The perfect Christmas party Sarah had orchestrated was crumbling, and I could see the calculation in her eyes as she figured out damage control. I need to get to the hospital, I said, but Sarah stepped forward. Actually, William, maybe we should talk first. Clear the air before this gets blown out of proportion. You've crossed every line that exists tonight, Sarah, I said, my voice low and steady despite the rage burning in my chest. She moved to the bar cart and poured herself another glass of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Have I? You know what I think, William? I think you're pathetically jealous of what Michael and I have accomplished here. Jealous of what exactly? Of the life we've built together, of our success, of our beautiful home. She gestured around the room with her wine glass. Look at this place, William. Really look at it. Michael's auto dealership is more profitable than it's ever been. We have this gorgeous house with all the finest furnishings. We're respected members of the community. She took a long sip before continuing, her voice taking on a sharp edge. And you? You're just a bitter old man living alone in a house full of dusty memories, clinging to a past that's dead and buried. You can't stand that we don't need you anymore. Michael set the watch box down hard. Sarah, maybe we should... No, let me finish. She turned to face me fully, and for the first time, her mask slipped completely. What I saw underneath was terrifying, pure hatred, mixed with something that looked like glee. You've been interfering since day one, William. Playing the devoted grandfather, bringing expensive gifts, trying to buy Tommy's affection. Well, newsflash, you're not his father. Michael is, and I'm his mother now. You're not his mother. You never will be. Really? Because I'm the only mother he's going to remember. Lisa's been dead 3 years, William. Tommy barely remembers her voice without photographs to remind him, but he'll remember me, the woman who gave him discipline, structure, respectability. Each word was a physical blow, but Sarah wasn't finished. And you know what else he'll remember? That his grandfather was the troublemaker, the one who called the police on his family, the one who couldn't accept that the world had moved on without him. I looked at Michael, really looked at him, the man who used to build tree houses with Tommy, who cried when Lisa died because he didn't know how to raise a son alone. Now he stood there silent while his new wife systematically destroyed his first family's memory. Michael, I said quietly. "Is this who you want to be?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The expensive watch caught the light as his hands trembled. For a moment I saw a flicker of the man he used to be, but then he looked at Sarah, saw something in her expression that made him shrink back. "I think maybe we all need some time to cool down." Sarah stepped between us, victory written across her face. "I think you should leave, William. And don't come back until you can respect our rules." I walked toward the door, my heart breaking. But at the threshold, I stopped. "What rules would those be, Sarah? The rule where you lock children outside in freezing weather? The rule where you erase their mother's memory? Or the rule where you steal what doesn't belong to you?" Her face went white as fresh snow, and I saw fear flicker in her eyes for the first time. Because I knew. I'd known for weeks what she was really doing, and tomorrow I was going to prove it to everyone. I sat in my truck outside the hospital emergency room, watching doctors examine Tommy through the brightly lit windows. The boy was sitting up now, his color much better, wrapped in heated blankets. There would be medical records now, documentation, evidence. My mind drifted back to 18 months ago, when Sarah entered our lives and our family's systematic destruction began. Michael had been completely shattered after Lisa's death 3 years earlier. For the first year and a half, he was utterly broken. He'd drop Tommy at my house Friday evenings and collect him Sunday nights, barely speaking, barely functioning. His auto dealership was hemorrhaging money because Michael couldn't focus on anything except his pain. Tommy, just 5 when his mother died, had slowly adapted to the new reality over those first 18 months. But he still didn't understand why his father remained so distant, why Daddy couldn't seem to find his way back to being the loving parent he used to be. Those weekends became the brightest lights in both our lives during Michael's extended grieving period. We'd spend Saturday mornings in my workshop, the same space where I'd taught Michael to use tools 40 years earlier, building model airplanes with patient precision. I'd tell Tommy stories about his mother while we worked, about how she used to sing lullabies completely off-key, but with so much love that it didn't matter, about how she'd burn cookies because she got distracted reading him bedtime stories. Every Sunday we'd visit Greenwood Cemetery, bringing fresh flowers to both Lisa's grave and my wife Margaret's. Tommy would talk to his mother's headstone like she could hear every word, telling her about the fish we'd caught, about his spelling tests, about his dreams and fears. He'd trace her name with his finger, Lisa Marie Henderson, beloved wife and mother. "Grandpa William," he'd said one chilly October Sunday about 2 years after Lisa's death, his small hand warm in mine as we stood between the two graves, "will you always take care of me? Even when I'm all grown up? Always, buddy." That's what grandfathers are for. Even if Daddy finds a new mommy someday? The question surprised me. Michael was so deep in his grief that I couldn't imagine him ever dating again. Even then, family is forever, Tommy. Nothing can change that. But I was wrong. Things did change dramatically 18 months ago, a full year and a half after Lisa's death. Michael finally started attending a grief counseling group at the community center. He'd come home from those Thursday sessions looking slightly more human, more present. I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe my son was finally beginning to heal after a year and a half of devastating grief. That's when Sarah entered our lives like a perfectly timed answer to prayer. She was a registered nurse at the Grief Counseling Center, leading support groups for people who'd lost spouses. 35 years old, attractive in a polished way, with calm competence that must have been exactly what Michael needed. She had a soothing voice, kind eyes, and endless patience for both Michael's grief and Tommy's needs. She started joining us for family dinners, bringing homemade casseroles, sitting patiently while Tommy showed her his latest Lego creation. At first, I was more than grateful. I was genuinely relieved. Michael was eating again, laughing occasionally, taking renewed interest in his business. Tommy, now 7 years old and having lived without his mother for a year and a half, seemed to like Sarah well enough. She wasn't trying to replace his mother, just offering gentle support. I remember being so thankful for Sarah's presence in those early months. I'd watch her patiently help Tommy with his homework at my kitchen table, never raising her voice when he struggled with math problems the way Lisa used to help him. She'd listen to his rambling stories about school with genuine interest, ask thoughtful questions about his friends, and even learn the names of all his model airplanes. When Tommy had nightmares about losing his father too, Sarah would sit with him until he fell back asleep, humming soft lullabies. "She's a godsend, William," I'd told my neighbor Mrs. Patterson back then. "I was so worried about Michael and Tommy, but Sarah has brought life back into that house." I even defended her when some of the church ladies whispered that it was too soon for Michael to be dating. "The boy needs stability," I'd argued, "and Michael deserves happiness again. Sarah understands loss. She's perfect for them." I helped plan their first Christmas together, suggesting traditions that might blend Sarah's background with our family's customs. I bought Sarah a beautiful wooden jewelry box for her birthday, inscribed with "Welcome to the family." When she cried upon opening it, saying no one had ever made her feel so accepted, I felt proud of how our family was healing. But looking back now, I could see the warning signs I'd missed because I'd wanted so desperately for this to work. How Sarah would subtly redirect conversations when Tommy mentioned Lisa, how she'd suggest improvements to Lisa's old recipes, making them healthier, how she'd encourage Michael to donate Lisa's belongings to charity, claiming it was part of the healing process. The changes happened so gradually that they felt natural. A family moving forward through grief, not a family being systematically erased. Michael and Sarah married 6 months ago in a small courthouse ceremony. Tommy was the ring bearer, proud to be part of his father's new beginning. Sarah had suggested skipping a big wedding, too stressful for everyone, especially Tommy, and I'd enthusiastically agreed, even offering to host a small reception at my house afterward. I thought it showed her consideration for the boy's emotional state and our family's financial situation. I gave a heartfelt toast that day, welcoming Sarah as the daughter I'd never had, thanking her for bringing my son back to life. Now I realized it was the first step in isolating Michael from anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions about their rapid courtship. After the wedding, I initially supported many of the changes Sarah suggested. When she recommended redecorating Tommy's room to be more age-appropriate, I helped pick out new furniture. When she suggested family counseling to help everyone adjust to their new dynamic, I praised her proactive approach. When she enrolled Tommy in extra activities to build his confidence and social skills, I drove him to soccer practice and piano lessons. Sarah would forget to invite me to Tommy's school events, but she always apologized so sincerely, often with tears in her eyes. "I'm still learning how to manage everything, William. I don't want to overstep, but I also don't want to leave you out. You're so important to Tommy." Her vulnerability seemed genuine, and I reassured her that these things took time to adjust. When she suggested that my weekly visits might be overwhelming Tommy during his adjustment period, I reluctantly agreed. "You're his mother now," I'd told her. "You know what's best for him." The pride and gratitude in her eyes had seemed so real. Then came the bigger changes that I initially supported because Sarah framed them as being for Tommy's good. She convinced Michael I was overstepping boundaries, that Tommy needed space to bond with his new mother, that my presence was confusing during this crucial adjustment period. My weekly visits became monthly, then every other month. Tommy would call crying, asking why I couldn't come over. I'd make excuses, hoping things would improve. They got worse. Sarah redecorated the house, removing Lisa's pictures and replacing them with her own family photos. She donated Lisa's belongings books, garden tools, even her grandmother's recipe box. When I protested, she claimed it was healthy to move forward instead of dwelling on painful reminders. Michael just nodded along with whatever Sarah suggested. The breaking point came 2 months ago. I'd arranged to take Tommy to the Natural History Museum. We'd been planning it for weeks. When I arrived, Sarah met me with a suitcase. "Actually, William, we've decided Tommy needs more consistency." These weekend trips are becoming too disruptive. Disruptive to what? Our family dynamic. We've been talking to Tommy's teacher about behavioral issues, difficulty with authority, emotional outbursts. All this back and forth is confusing him. I knew it was a lie. Mrs. Rodriguez had told me just the week before how well Tommy was doing, how much he talked about our adventures. But Michael stood behind Sarah, nodding like a programmed robot. "We'll take him next month as a family," Sarah said smoothly. They never did. That night I started investigating. I contacted Tommy's school, his friends' parents, and neighbors. What I learned chilled me. Sarah had been telling people I was struggling with cognitive decline, that I was becoming inappropriate with Tommy, that they were concerned for his safety around me. None of it was true, but the seeds of doubt were planted and growing. Mrs. Patterson finally told me the truth. Sarah approached me asking if I'd noticed concerning behavior from you with Tommy. When I said no, she suggested I wasn't observing closely enough. The picture became clear. Sarah wasn't just replacing Lisa, she was replacing me entirely. Systematically isolating Michael, poisoning people against me, positioning herself as Tommy's sole protector. But why? Sitting in that hospital parking lot, the answer crystallized. Money, property, control. Michael owned the dealership outright, worth $2.3 million, plus life insurance, the house, savings, investments. Sarah had married into a small fortune, but there was one problem: me. As Tommy's grandfather, I had legal standing to challenge custody arrangements, contest adoptions, and provide a stable alternative home. Unless I was deemed unfit due to cognitive decline and inappropriate behavior. Watching Tommy in that hospital bed, I finally understood her complete end game. She wasn't just trying to replace me, she was systematically working to eliminate me entirely, and tonight had shown me exactly how far she was willing to go. Tommy was discharged from the hospital 3 hours later with clean medical reports, though the doctor warned me to watch for signs of delayed shock. As I drove him to my house, Sarah had graciously agreed, probably to avoid more police involvement. He finally spoke. "Grandpa William, why does Sarah hate me so much?" The question came out broken, like he'd been holding it inside for months. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What makes you think she hates you, buddy?" Tommy stared out at snow-covered houses decorated with Christmas lights. "She's always telling Daddy I'm too loud, or I make messes, or I bother people. And she says mean things about Mom when she thinks I can't hear." My chest tightened. What kind of mean things? She told Mrs. Johnson that Mom was mentally unstable, and that's why she crashed. She said I might have inherited the same problems, and that's why I need so much discipline. His voice got smaller. She said that's why Mom couldn't take care of me properly. I had to pull over. The world spun with rage so intense I thought I might pass out. Lisa had been the most stable, loving person I'd ever known. The accident was caused by a drunk driver, not mental health issues. To suggest otherwise, to poison people against her memory and make them fear her son, was beyond cruel. "Tommy, has Sarah ever hurt you besides tonight?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then whispering, "She pinches me when Daddy's not looking. Really hard, on my arms where it doesn't show. And she throws away all the pictures I draw of Mom. I tried hiding them, but she always finds them. She says they're unhealthy." "What else?" "She makes me eat foods that make me sick. She says Mom spoiled me. And she told me if I keep talking about Mom, she'll send me to a special boarding school for troubled children." Each revelation was a knife to the heart. This wasn't poor judgment. This was systematic psychological abuse designed to break a child's spirit and erase his connection to his mother. "Tommy, listen carefully. Nothing Sarah says about your mom is true. Your mother was wonderful and healthy and loving. She died because a bad man chose to drive drunk. You don't have problems that need fixing." "But Sarah's a nurse. She knows medical stuff." Being a nurse doesn't make someone good, buddy, and it doesn't give them the right to hurt children. The next morning, while Tommy slept in his old room, I called my lawyer, Frank Morrison. "William, are you certain about these allegations?" "Frank, I've seen the bruises. I've watched her isolate him systematically. Last night she locked him outside in 30-degree weather for 90 minutes. That's serious. But proving psychological abuse is difficult, especially when one parent isn't supporting the allegations. Courts are reluctant to interfere unless there's clear immediate danger. What would prove immediate danger? Documentation, witnesses, medical records, a pattern of escalating behavior showing the child faces serious harm. I have last night's medical records. That's a start. But one incident might not be enough. You'd need to show this is part of a larger pattern. After hanging up, I found Tommy in my workshop, touching the half-finished model airplane we'd been building before Sarah limited our visits. A P-51 Mustang, the same plane his great-grandfather flew in World War II. Will I have to go back there, Grandpa? I don't know, buddy, but I promise I'll figure something out. I don't want to go back. Sarah scares me. How does she scare you? Sometimes she looks at me like she wishes I would disappear. And she whispers to Daddy about me when they think I'm not listening. She wants him to send me away. Away where? I heard her talking about boarding schools for problem children. She said it would be better if I learned independence early. My blood went cold. Boarding school. Send Tommy away, claim it was for his good, gradually reduce Michael's contact until the boy became nothing more than a holiday visitor. Meanwhile, Sarah would have Michael and his money all to herself. That afternoon, Child Protective Services arrived. The caseworker, Janet Pierce, interviewed Tommy privately while I waited in the kitchen, heart hammering. When she finished, she sat across from me, expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Henderson, I need to ask direct questions about your relationship with your grandson." "Of course. Has your daughter-in-law expressed concerns about your interactions with Tommy?" My heart sank. "What concerns?" "Mrs. Henderson called our office 3 weeks ago. She filed a report about your mental state and appropriateness around Tommy. She mentioned cognitive decline, inappropriate boundary setting, and obsessive behavior regarding the child." The room spun. "That's not true. None of it." She provided specific examples. Expensive gifts the parents felt were inappropriate, attempts to undermine their disciplinary decisions, encouraging the child to keep secrets about your activities. Each accusation was a blow. The bicycle for Tommy's birthday became excessive gift-giving. Telling him it was okay to cry for his mother became undermining authority. Our ice cream stops became encouraging secrets. Sarah had weaponized every normal aspect of our relationship. "Mrs. Pierce, I can provide character references from Tommy's teacher, my neighbors, anyone you'd like. I've never shown cognitive decline, never been inappropriate." "I understand. Tommy shows no signs of sexual abuse or inappropriate contact. But there are concerns about dynamics here." "What dynamics?" "The child is attached to you in ways that might interfere with bonding with his stepmother. He talks about you constantly, compares his situation unfavorably to time with you, seems to use your relationship to avoid accepting his new family." I stared at her in disbelief. "He talks about me because I'm one of the few people who treats him with genuine kindness and respect." Perhaps. But from the standpoint of family stability, we need to consider what's best for Tommy's long-term adjustment to his new family structure. The clinical language made my skin crawl. She was talking about Tommy like he was a problem to be managed, rather than a grieving child who needed love. "What are you recommending?" "Supervised visits only, until we complete psychological evaluations. This gives the family time to work on dynamics without outside interference." "I'm his grandfather. I've been taking care of that boy since his mother died. I'm not interfering. I'm family." Sometimes what feels like love can actually be enabling problematic behaviors. Sometimes the kindest thing is to step back and allow them to adapt. After Janet Pierce left, I sat alone, feeling every one of my 72 years weighing on my shoulders. Outside, snow was falling again, covering the world in deceptive peace. But inside my heart, I felt like I was drowning in Sarah's toxic web. The house felt too quiet without Tommy's presence. This was what Sarah wanted. Me isolated, cut off from the person who gave my life meaning, reduced to a lonely old man with nothing but memories. That's when my telephone rang. "William?" The voice was unfamiliar, elderly, with a slight southern accent. "This is Eleanor Patterson, your neighbor from 3 houses down. I think there's something urgent you need to know about your daughter-in-law." "Mrs. Patterson? What is it?" "It's about Sarah, about who she really is." "William, I don't think this is her first time doing something like this." My hands started shaking. "What do you mean?" "You need to come over here right now, and you might want to bring a lawyer because what I've discovered is going to change everything." Eleanor Patterson's living room smelled like lavender and old books filled with comfortable clutter, but the manila folders on her coffee table looked anything but comfortable. Eleanor had been head librarian for 40 years. She still had the researcher's instinct for uncovering buried truth. "William, I should have called sooner, but I didn't want to interfere," she said, hands trembling with anxiety. "But after last night, seeing that child carried away by police, I couldn't stay silent." "What did you find, Eleanor?" She opened the first folder carefully. "After Sarah started those rumors about your mental health, I got suspicious. You're one of the sharpest people I know. The idea of cognitive decline seemed absurd." "So what did you do?" "Research." She pulled out papers. Sarah's maiden name is Sarah Beth Crawford, 35, originally from Phoenix, but that's not the interesting part. My heart raced. "What is?" "She's been married before. Twice. Both times to widowers with young children and substantial assets. The world tilted. Both times?" Eleanor handed me a Phoenix newspaper clipping from 5 years ago. The headline read, "Local nurse investigated in child endangerment case." The photo showed a younger Sarah, different hairstyle but the same cold eyes. First husband was David Crawford, a successful real estate developer. Widower with 6-year-old daughter Emma. They married after a whirlwind romance. He was grieving his wife's cancer death. Sarah was his grief counselor. Just like Michael. Exactly. The marriage lasted 2 years, ending in bitter divorce when David's former in-laws sued for custody of Emma. They claimed Sarah was psychologically abusing the child. I scanned the article with growing horror. Incidents of Emma being locked outside as punishment, denied meals, isolated from family. The investigation closed due to insufficient evidence, but David lost custody to his former in-laws while Sarah disappeared with a substantial settlement. The second husband? Eleanor opened another folder. Robert Miller, restaurant owner in Seattle, also a widower with 8-year-old twin boys. Sarah got a job at a grief center there, despite the Phoenix investigation on her record. Same pattern? Identical. Married Robert after 6 months, immediately isolated the boys from their grandparents, reported behavioral problems that hadn't existed before. Within 18 months, Robert's parents were fighting for custody. Did they win? Yes, but only because one twin ended up hospitalized with suspicious injuries. Bruises Sarah claimed were from playground accidents, but doctors suspected were inflicted. Robert finally saw the truth and divorced her, but the custody battle destroyed his relationship with his parents and nearly bankrupted him. I felt sick. Tommy's bruises. How long before Sarah escalated from pinching to something requiring hospitalization? How did you find all this? Robert's mother, Grace Miller, lives in Florida now. I tracked her through social media. She was eager to talk once I mentioned Sarah's name. Eleanor played a voicemail. A woman's voice, heavy with grief. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Grace Miller. Oh my goodness, yes, I remember Sarah Crawford. That woman destroyed my family. She turned my son against us, convinced him we were the problem. She had those boys so confused and frightened. Robert didn't see what was happening until almost too late. By then, she'd started legal paperwork to adopt them and cut us out completely. She's a predator. She targets vulnerable families and feeds on their grief like a parasite. If you know someone involved with that woman, warn them. She's dangerous and very good at what she does. The room spun. Eleanor, how did she get away with it? Moving from state to state, finding new victims? She's smart, William. Changes her name slightly. Sarah Crawford, Sarah Beth Miller, now Sarah Henderson. Gets jobs in grief counseling or nursing, positions giving access to vulnerable families. And she's careful never to leave enough evidence for criminal charges. But you have evidence now. Patterns, documentation, and something else. She handed me a document. Grace Miller agreed to fly here and testify if needed. She wants to prevent Sarah from destroying another family. I stared at the airline confirmation. Grace Miller was arriving tomorrow. There's more. Sarah filed paperwork last week to legally adopt Tommy. Once that goes through, she'll have equal parental rights. And if something happens to Michael, she gets everything: business, house, insurance, and full custody of Tommy, with no interference from grandparents who might ask uncomfortable questions. We sat in silence, the weight of Sarah's plan settling like a burial shroud. She hadn't married Michael for love. She'd targeted him because he was a wealthy widower with a young child, exactly her previous victim's profile. What do? We stop her, Eleanor said with surprising steel. I've called David Crawford in Phoenix. He's willing to testify. Robert Miller is reluctant. Sarah really destroyed him, but his mother thinks she can convince him. Will that be enough? Combined with last night's incident and Tommy's medical records, it should at least delay the adoption and trigger thorough investigation. I stood and walked to Eleanor's window, looking out at the snow-covered street. Somewhere across town, Tommy was probably waking from a nap, wondering if he'd have to return to that house. Michael was dealing with having police at his Christmas party, maybe starting to ask uncomfortable questions. And Sarah? Probably already working on her next manipulation, her next step to eliminate me from Tommy's life forever. Eleanor, I need you to make copies of everything and call Grace Miller, tell her to come prepared to stay as long as necessary. What are you going to do? Save my family. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of waiting for lawyers and courts and bureaucratic processes that might take months, I was going to confront Sarah directly, but not alone and not without overwhelming evidence. I called Frank Morrison and arranged to meet at Michael's house the next morning. I called Grace Miller and asked her to come straight from the airport. I called Officer Martinez to ensure he understood this was an ongoing situation requiring police attention. But first, I needed to have a conversation with my son, a conversation 18 months overdue. I picked up my phone and dialed Michael's number. Hello, Dad. Michael, I need you to listen very carefully. Tomorrow morning, I'm coming to your house with my lawyer and some other people. We're going to have a conversation about Sarah that's going to be difficult to hear. Dad, I don't think... Your wife is not who you think she is, son. She's done this before, to other families. Other children. I have proof. Long silence. What kind of proof? The kind that's going to save Tommy's life. The kind that's going to save yours, too. Another silence. Then, quietly, what do you mean she's done this before? I mean, Sarah has systematically destroyed 2 other families exactly the same way she's destroying ours. I mean, she's a predator who targets grieving widowers with young children and substantial assets. I mean, everything she's told you about me, about Tommy, about what's best for your family, it's all lies designed to isolate you and control you. That's impossible. Is it? When's the last time you made a decision about Tommy without Sarah's input? When's the last time you saw your friends, talked to neighbors, had any relationship she didn't approve of? When's the last time you felt like the man you used to be instead of a puppet dancing to her tune? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "Dad," he said finally, his voice breaking. "What have I done?" "You got fooled by a professional, son. It's not your fault, but now we're going to fix it." "How?" "By showing her that she picked the wrong family to destroy, by proving that love and truth are stronger than manipulation and lies, by fighting for Tommy the way your mother would have wanted us to." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, burning hope that maybe we could save what Sarah had tried so hard to destroy. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation that would determine my family's future. Tonight, I said a prayer for strength, for wisdom, and for the 7 words that would shatter Sarah's perfect facade forever. "We know who you really are, Sarah." The confrontation that would determine my family's future took place the next morning in Michael's living room, the same room where 24 hours earlier they'd celebrated Christmas while Tommy froze outside. Now the space felt completely different. The tree looked garish in morning light, the expensive decorations seemed cold and meaningless, and Sarah's perfect tableau felt like the facade it had always been. When I arrived with Frank Morrison, Grace Miller was already there, having taken a red-eye from Florida. She was small and elderly, with steel in her spine and eyes that had seen too much suffering. David Crawford had driven through the night from Phoenix, unable to sleep until he could finally speak the truth about what Sarah had done. Even Eleanor Patterson was there, research folders organized and ready. Sarah met us at the door, her usual composure cracking when she saw Grace. "I don't know what lies these people have told you, but I don't have to listen to this," she said, voice shaking now. "Actually, you do," Frank said calmly, settling his briefcase on the coffee table. "Your husband requested this meeting. As his wife, you're welcome to participate or leave. But either way, we're having this conversation." Michael appeared from the kitchen, looking like he hadn't slept. When he saw the assembled group, he seemed to shrink, but he didn't ask us to leave. For the next 3 hours, we laid out Sarah's history piece by piece. Grace Miller spoke with quiet dignity about watching her grandson's personalities change under Sarah's influence, about bruises that appeared and were explained away, about gradual isolation from family and friends. "She convinced my son we were the problem," Grace said, never taking her eyes off Sarah. "She had those boys so confused and frightened they didn't know who to trust. She filed adoption papers without Robert's knowledge and tried to cut us out completely." David Crawford's voice broke as he described losing custody of his daughter. "Sarah convinced me that Emma's behavioral problems were because my former in-laws were interfering. I believed her. I chose her over my own child." "The pattern is always the same," Grace continued. "She finds a grieving widower with money and a young child. She positions herself as rescuer, healer. Then she systematically isolates the child from anyone who might protect them while turning the father against his own family. Sarah tried several tactics. First, denial. "These people are lying. I've never seen them before." Then misdirection. "This is clearly a conspiracy by William because he can't accept that Michael has moved on." Finally, victimhood. "I was trying to help those families. If I made mistakes, it was because I cared too much." But Michael wasn't buying it anymore. Something had broken in him during our phone call. Maybe the realization of how thoroughly he'd been manipulated. "Sarah," he said quietly, "did you deliberately lock Tommy outside last night?" "I told you he was having an episode." "Did you deliberately lock my 8-year-old son outside in 30-degree weather for over an hour?" She hesitated just long enough for the truth to show in her eyes. He needed discipline. He needed his father to protect him. Grace opened her purse and pulled out a photograph, 2 smiling boys with dark hair and bright eyes, standing next to a Christmas tree. "These are my grandsons, Michael." Tommy's age when Sarah came into their lives. She convinced my son we were interfering with their new family dynamic. By the time Robert realized what was happening, the boys were afraid to be alone with her, afraid to eat food she prepared, afraid to sleep in their own house. Michael took the photo with shaking hands. What happened to them? They're safe now. They live with us in Florida, getting therapy for the trauma. But it took years to undo the damage she did in 18 months. Sarah made one final attempt at control. Michael, you know me. You know how much I love you and Tommy. These people are strangers trying to destroy our family because your father can't stand seeing you happy. But it was too late. Michael was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time, seeing past the mask she'd worn for over a year. Get out, he said quietly. Michael, you can't mean... Get out of my house. Get out of our lives. Get out before I call the police myself. When I shouted those 7 words, we know who you really are, Sarah. As she packed her bags that afternoon, her mask finally fell off completely. The sweet, caring nurse disappeared, replaced by something cold and reptilian. You think you've won? She hissed. You'll never prove any of this. And Michael will come crawling back within a month. But she was wrong on both counts. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Faced with testimony from multiple victims and medical evidence of Tommy's abuse, Sarah agreed to a settlement, giving her nothing except a promise not to pursue criminal charges. The adoption paperwork was withdrawn, rumors about my mental health were retracted, and Sarah Henderson disappeared from our lives as quickly as she'd entered. The real healing took much longer. Michael struggled with crushing guilt about what he'd allowed. Tommy had nightmares for months, jumping at unexpected sounds, flinching when adults raised voices, obsessively checking door locks to ensure he wouldn't be trapped outside again. I spent countless hours in therapy sessions with both of them, helping them understand they were victims, not accomplices. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what she'd tried to destroy. Michael moved back to the house he'd shared with Lisa, the one with the workshop in the garage where she'd grown tomatoes. He put her pictures back on walls, retrieved her recipe box from charity shops, started telling Tommy real stories about his mother again, not sanitized versions Sarah had allowed. I returned to weekly visits, then more. Tommy spent every weekend at my house for months, finding safety in familiar routines of building model airplanes and visiting the cemetery. We finished the P-51 Mustang he'd been working on when Sarah cut off our visits, then started a new project, a replica of the Wright Flyer. "Grandpa William," he said one Sunday as we worked in my shop, "do you think Mommy knows what happened to us?" I looked at this brave boy who'd survived something no child should endure and thought about Lisa, about Margaret, about all the people we love who watch over us. "I think she knows we're safe now, buddy." I think that's all she ever wanted. 3 months after Sarah left, I received a call from a Denver detective. Sarah Beth Henderson, now using the name Sarah Collins, had been arrested for child endangerment in a new case. She'd married another widower, a man named Patrick Collins with a 7-year-old daughter. But this time, when she tried her usual tactics, the father was prepared. Grace Miller had tracked down Patrick through social media and warned him. The little girl was removed immediately. Sarah was charged with multiple counts of child abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and identity theft. With testimony from Grace, David, Robert, and our family, she was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Justice, finally. Not just for Tommy, but for all the children she'd hurt. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after that terrible night, I walked up Michael's driveway carrying presents for Tommy. Not expensive guilt offerings, but thoughtful gifts chosen with love. A new model airplane kit, a book about aviation history, and a framed photo of Lisa and Tommy from his 5th birthday. When I knocked, the door opened immediately. "Grandpa William!" Tommy threw his arms around me with the enthusiasm of a child who'd learned that people who love him will always be there and will never let him face the cold alone again. Inside, the house looked like a real home again. The tree was smaller but brighter, decorated with ornaments Tommy had made and mismatched lights Lisa had collected. Her picture sat prominently on the mantel, surrounded by candles and fresh flowers, not as a shrine to the past, but as a celebration of love connecting all of us. Michael hugged me with tears in his eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry. Sorry for choosing her over you, over Tommy, over Mom's memory. I almost lost everything that mattered." "You didn't lose it," I said, holding my son and grandson in the warmth of that imperfect, beautiful, real home. "Family isn't something you can lose, Michael. It's something you can neglect or ignore or take for granted, but it's always there when you need it most." Tommy pulled me toward the tree, eager to show me the model airplane he'd finished himself, a perfect Wright Flyer replica, complete with historically accurate details he'd researched independently. As we knelt examining his craftsmanship, he looked up with eyes that had learned too much about darkness but still shone with hope. "Grandpa William, will you always take care of me?" I thought about promises we make and keep, about love that survives even the most determined attempts to destroy it, about the simple truth that family means never having to face the cold alone. "Always, buddy. That's what grandfathers are for." Outside, snow was falling gently, covering the world in the clean beauty of fresh starts. Inside, we were warm and safe and together, building new memories while honoring old ones, protecting what mattered most. That's all any family really needs. Knowledge that no matter what storms come, no matter what predators circle, no matter how dark the night gets, there will always be someone willing to break down doors and fight battles and stand guard against everything that threatens the people we love. Love doesn't make a family perfect, but it makes them unbreakable. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the people who've stood up for you when you needed protection most, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, no matter how dark things get, there's always someone willing to stand in the light with you.